I came upon this runic artifact, this Raum Vadstena Bracteate, and it has some interesting features, and I think it serves as a good example of how much variation there really was in runic. Here's a close-up, but there's also a sketch on this website which goes into more detail, so I'm going to use that instead. So the inscription seems to begin with some kind of word, luwa, tuwa, or something like that. Then there's a break, then it has the first 8 letters of the rune row, and then it has the next 8, and then there's another break followed by the next 8. And this is pretty typical to divide the rune row into 3 groups of 8. Something not typical is to replace the P rune with the B rune, and then to also have the B rune show up again in its usual location. This seems to reflect a growing trend among Proto-Norse speakers to drop the P rune and replace it with a B. I'm aware of that being something they did, but I've never seen something this striking, to kick the P rune out of the rune row and to replace it with a B rune, even though the B rune shows up again. That's pretty noteworthy, I think. Over here you can see a kind of standardization of the J rune, because the original, or at least the oldest, shape of the J rune we're familiar with comes in 2 segments. I want to point out that even though I'm calling it a J rune, it didn't make a J sound. It made a Y sound, and later on among Norse speakers it turned into a kind of ah vowel. I find it interesting that they're using a kind of normalized J rune, but they're not using a normalized C rune. Something you start seeing around this time period is people give the C rune a staff, and then later that would turn into this shape we're familiar with from Younger Futhark. It's worth noting that the U rune, I'm going to call it, is taking on this shape rather than this shape. We're so used to looking at standardizations where it always takes on this form, but if you look back at actual inscriptions, it often takes on this form, which to our sensibilities is backwards. This is the first time I've ever seen the NG rune take on this shape. This is the shape that we're used to in our modern attempts at depicting Elder Futhark. You know, you see this, for example, in the computer font, but I've only ever seen it show up as a square rather than a diamond. I've seen it show up as a circle in one case. In English, I've seen it show up with this shape, this kind of normalized full height shape, and I've seen it show up in this bind rune, but I've never actually seen it show up as the kind of diamond shape we see online so much. And so I find that worth noting. I think that's interesting. It's good to know that that shape is attested. Notice how they used 1 dot here for the break, but then this break and this break, they use 2 dots. That goes to show just how flippant they were with consistency back then. Unless maybe the intention was to show that these are different kinds of breaks. Like maybe this one has 1 dot to let you know that this is not part of the rune row, and then these ones are here because they take place within the rune row. Actually, the rune row ends here. There would probably be a D rune hiding back there.